Hello there and welcome to my review of Lords of the Fallen from 2023. Not the previous Lords of the Fallen game from years ago that I did try but didn't really like. No, this is much better. This is much more like a FromSoft game, the way it's designed, the concept work. And I really love FromSoft games. So I was really intrigued by this title. It's by a company called Hexworks, a developer that's actually put together specifically to make this game, and they've done a fantastic job. I mean, there's definitely issues with this game. I'll get into that, and yeah, there's some serious issues actually. I'll get into that towards the end of the review. But yeah, you can play with other people. I'm playing with my mate here. You can only play with one other person. And you can go into their world and help them. They can come into your world and help you. I played quite a lot of it solo. I did bosses with my friend. I did bosses on my own. Yeah, so I got a good feel for the game. I got invaded a few times as well. The level design is excellent. I have to say, it's really reminiscent of Dark Souls 1, I'd say. A really well interconnected world. You can unlock shortcuts there. So my friend just pulled that ladder down. I'm in his world, helping him at the moment. Some of the shortcuts were a bit superfluous. What? Yeah, so yeah, and some of these points where you can save the game, they're also a bit strangely positioned sometimes. And you can put seeds down, which allow you to save the game in certain points, like optional save points if you like, and they're positioned a bit odd sometimes as well. But yeah, it's a really nice looking game, as you can see. And playing with another person was a lot of fun, but playing with someone else is definitely easy mode. Like, we just destroyed the bosses when we played together. And also, when you play with someone else, you still get vigour, which is what you use to level up your character. So you're kind of double dipping. Like, I'd go into his world and help him defeat a boss, and we'd both get vigour. And then he'd come into mine and help me defeat the same boss, and we'd get a load of vigour again. And you get some weird stuff like this guy jumping up and down. This enemy just keeps jumping up and down. So yeah, that was a bit weird. There are sort of glitchy things like this in the game. It's quite funny. I shouldn't be able to jump that high, really, should he? But obviously, it's at the limit of where he's supposed to go. It's like, no, give it up, mate. But obviously, when the AI is trying to figure out, what path to put him on, it's getting a bit confused there with that. He shouldn't be able to jump that high. But visually, it's a really nice looking game. It does look a bit washed out colour wise. It's running on Unreal Engine 5. Apparently it is using nanite technology and lumens. But yeah, it does look a bit monochromatic. There is some very strong lighting with the lumens, sort of dynamic lighting effects that kind of homogenise the way it looks. It illuminates everything and makes it look very sort of primary colour, look like reds and greens. It's very reminiscent of how a FromSoft game looks, really. I don't know if they've done that deliberately or not, but yeah, I kind of wish that the textures were a bit more rich in colour, a bit more variety, but it looked a bit less monochromatic. But there's loads of detail. Beautifully designed enemies. I mean, this is like a little kind of mini boss. When they introduce a new character for you to fight, they often introduce them as like a little mini boss, and it's really well done. I've really got no complaints about that at all. And here I've been invaded. You can see on the left there that a guy, his name's up there, his PSN name is, I'm playing on PS5, and this guy's invaded me. It can happen at certain points in the game. So I'm running away thinking, okay, I hide somewhere, and then he hits me with this, kills me like just one blast of this magic spell. This really overpowered magic spell. and it puts me into the Umbral world, which is kind of like a second life, if you like. So if I die in the Umbral world, then I die permanently. So he's probably quite happy now, thinking, oh, I'm going to get this guy. But he's trying to do these sort of heavy attacks that are easily like, you can see the tail on them is so easy to spot, such as rolling away. And then I'm sort of chipping away at him, and he's backing off. I got him. That's always satisfying when you get an invader. And I get some red hands, which I can then use to buy things. Oh. But you have to deal, when you're trying to kill the invader, you still have to kill the enemies as well. So you've got to deal with the enemies and the invader. It can get a bit much sometimes. So you can do emotes. And I think the invader kind of can see you for a little while, so you can do a little cheeky emote. But you can see the amount of geometry is just phenomenal. I mean, it is definitely a next-gen looking game for sure. In fact, there's almost like too much geometry for the PS5 to handle. Sometimes it kind of bugs out and bits of geometry don't load in. I'll talk a bit more about that later on. But I wanted to concentrate on what I liked about the game, really. And for me, it is the environments and the way they're constructed. And now I'm in the Umbral world. So the longer I stay in the Umbral world, the tougher the enemies will become. And if I stay in it too long, this sort of unkillable enemy comes to get you. But sometimes you need to go into the Umbral sort of undead world to actually navigate the environment, as sometimes you can only get to certain areas via the undead world. But then when you go to a sort of a save point, you can then get back into the real world. You can actually use your lamp to sort of peer into the Umbral world. But you've got to be careful, because monsters can actually grab you and pull you into it. So here I'm going to use my lamp to get this thing here. This is kind of protecting enemies. So I have to peer into the Umbral world and get rid of that thing that was protecting the enemies. So now they're easier to kill. So this guy's kind of a mini boss. Again, there's another sort of character that they're introducing. And you can use your lamp to pull their soul out and then attack their soul. And you get what's called wither damage. If you notice on the health bar there, it kind of went grey. That's wither damage. So I was doing wither damage to his soul, but then when his soul goes back into his body, you then have to hit him a few times to actually take that health off of him. So there's a few different mechanics in the game that make it a bit unique and a bit interesting. Some people find using the lamp to be a bit awkward, a bit clunky, especially when you're fighting lots of enemies. And I kind of agree with that. But on the whole, I think the lamp works very well, and it is really well integrated into the game. And it does sort of distinguish it. I mean, it has to do something a bit different. But it's nice. The sound's nice. The audio's nice. I think they redid the audio a few times until they was happier with it. And you do get some little cut sequences like this. So little cut scenes. And this is very reminiscent of FromSoft, and it's done well. But I think the art direction is really, really good. The artists have done a fantastic job. Kind of reminds me of the Dark Souls games for sure, with a bit of Bloodborne mixed in there as well. And I love those games, you know. And they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So I think FromSoft should be flattered that Hexworks have obviously taken so much inspiration from their work. And Hexworks are obviously massive fans of FromSoft. You know, they make no bones about it. You know, they've just gone for it. This is the game they wanted to make, and they're doing it. You know, and there's some really cool bosses. Like this guy was really good, really quite interesting design. And that's what I love about FromSoft games, is the bosses. It's a big part of any Souls-like. And they do a good job with the bosses on the whole, I think. They are a bit on the easy side. They're not as challenging. Some of them have like 2 stages to them. Lots of them don't though. So it's a bit of a mixed bag with the bosses. Some of them are quite like really easy. Some of them, like this one here, this is like I would say a very easy boss, and it's kind of midway through the game. And yet it's probably one of the easiest bosses. I mean, it's not a bad boss, and it's a bit different. The way you have to just run around and avoid things. But yeah, this is... I mean, not every boss needs to be like really difficult. As long as it's just imaginative and well designed, and I think this is. So it wasn't particularly challenging, but I still enjoyed it. I still had a good time with it. I think I spent about 73 hours, something like that, playing the game, and I really, really had a good time. Now I thought I was going to have to fight this bird thing, because I thought, okay, this bird's probably going to start attacking me, but no, it didn't happen. So yeah, there's kind of certain things in the game you kind of think, well, why didn't they make the boss multi-stage? I mean, they had that bird thing. They could have done something with it to, to extend the fight a bit longer. But there you go. There's these in the Umbral world. There's these memories that you can use your lamp to activate, and it kind of gives you a bit of the backstory. Now this was actually a multi-staged boss. This is the latter stage, and this was actually quite a challenging boss for me, because I just had a weapon that did a lot of physical damage, but my mate, he had a weapon that did holy damage, and he just destroyed this boss. He had a couple of swords with holy damage on them, and he just melted this boss. He didn't even see all the attacks that the boss had to offer. But for me, because I just had physical sword, just did physical damage, it was actually quite challenging, and I actually really enjoyed this boss. I'd say one of the real negatives of this game is being animation locked. You get animation locked a lot, especially if you chain attacks together. You kind of get locked into this sequence of animations you can't get out of, and you might see a boss is going to do an area of effect attack, and I need to roll and get out of it, but you can't, because you have to wait for the animations to play out before you can roll, and then before that it's too late. So yeah, I just wish that it was a bit more responsive and a bit more forgiving with it, allowing you to break out of attacks. It's just not as well refined as, say, Elden Ring in terms of the combat. And I think a lot of people that are disappointed with this game were comparing it to Elden Ring, which is obviously a phenomenal game. If you want to play a Souls-like, play Elden Ring. If you haven't played that, play that. That is an incredible game. But if you've played Dark Souls, you've played Sekiro, you've played Bloodborne and Elden Ring, then yeah, I definitely think give this a go. It's more action orientated. They do throw a lot of enemies at you. So actually running with 2 weapons, double-handed with swords or daggers, actually works very well, because you do get mobbed a lot. But I just like a sword and a shield. I've always, even if I'm not really using the shield much. You can parry attacks, but I found it to be a bit inconsistent, especially when the frame drops. Like, a lot of the time you get frame drops. Like the game, I'm playing it in a performance mode, and it's supposed to be 60 frames a second, but often when you really needed that 60 frames a second, when you really need that sort of smoothness, it would let you down, because you'd get lots of enemies on the screen, or lots of geometry and a big boss, and yeah, you get lots of frame drops, which is not good, to be honest, for a game like this. You really want it to be a locked 60 when you're playing this sort of game. You don't want to feel like you've got input lag, or the game sort of lagging behind what you're doing. Now here I'm in sort of the hub area, and I've gone into the Umbral world, and there's actually an NPC here in the Umbral world. You have to go in the Umbral world to see him, and he's pretty cool. And you can see me and my mate got some pretty cool armour at this stage. There's loads of armour, loads of weapons. It's all really well designed. They're a bit stingy on the upgrade materials for the weapons, so I only upgraded a couple of weapons. I only actually got this sword I'm carrying now up to sort of max level. So you definitely need to play this game through multiple times if you want to do different builds, which are possible, and try out lots of different weapons. So if you're a one and done sort of person, you're going to miss out on a lot, really. But the combat is decent. The collision detection can be a bit dodgy. As I say, being animation locks kind of puts you off chaining together attacks. So what I would do is just chip away at bosses. Just do single attacks. There we go. Use the lamp to pull the soul out. But the boss, like, this is a sort of a mini boss, I'd say. But they're well designed. They've got lots of different attacks. There's a nice variety in the bosses. Sometimes the areas you have to fight in are a bit too confined. I did find that sometimes you're battling enemies and there's all this geometry everywhere and you get stuck on it. It can be annoying. Actually doing attacks from above. Here I'm going to do an attack from above and I'm going to destroy. See, I literally destroy this enemy with that drop down attack. So that's a good tip for if you do play the game. Make use of that if you can. But this area kind of reminded me a bit of Bloodborne. The way it looked. But there's a great like verticality to the areas. You're going up and down in lifts, and there's cavernous areas. There's really nice stone structures. There's good vistas. You can look off to the distance and see other places you can go to. So yeah, it's quite an ambitious game. I mean, here I'm in this sort of cavernous area, and you can explore and you can see all these different mechanisms and things you can interact with. It's good. It's got a good atmosphere for sure. Kind of spooky, this area. Now what I would say is the lock-on mechanic can be a bit clunky in this game. I think a lot of people have been complaining about it. And I think that that's true of most Souls-like games. The lock-on mechanic can always be something you kind of have to wrestle with to get to work how you want it, to lock onto the enemy you want to lock onto. But because they throw so many enemies at you, it kind of compounds the problem. Whereas most FromSoft games only throw 1 or 2 enemies at you at a time. In Lords of the Fallen, there can be like 6 or 7 enemies attacking you. And then yeah, the lock-on can be a bit of a nightmare. Especially because you can chain together attacks and you do big lunge attacks. So if an enemy moves off the edge of a cliff and you've locked onto them, you'll go off the cliff with them. And as I said, there's lots of geometry, so if an enemy moves behind a bit of geometry, so I'm putting down a seedling here, I'm creating my own save point where these flowers are, you can do that. But yeah, sometimes you lock onto an enemy, the enemy will move behind a bit of geometry, you'll hit the geometry and be propelled off the side of a cliff. There's lots of areas like this where you are on the side of a mountain or a rock wall on this sort of precarious platforms. There's even sections where you've got to jumping sections onto moving platforms, and you have to run and then jump. You can't just jump, so you have to run and jump, and it's just really awkward sometimes to land the jumps. And because of the geometry, you can hit a bit of geometry and be pushed off into a different direction and completely miss the jump. And of course in the Souls-like, when you might have battled to get to that area and then to be pushed all the way back, you know, because of something like that, it can be really frustrating. But I finished the game and I enjoyed it. I wanted to see what was next. I kept wanting to battle on. I never ever felt like I was going to give up on this game. I knew I wanted to complete it. So here's this a nice cutscene. I didn't get too much into the story. I wouldn't say there's any particular characters that I was that invested in. But obviously there's this corruption spreading throughout the world and it affects people in different ways. And there's sort of a romance between one couple and they get caught up in all this. So there's certain bits of the story I did like. And this is towards the end of the game, so I was thinking this was going to be a really challenging fight, a multi-stage fight, but that didn't turn out to be the case. In classic FromSoft style, you have invincibility frames, so big guys like this, I just sort of keep close, roll when they jump. Sort of classic Souls-like technique for dealing with big enemies like this. And it worked perfectly well. And I beat this guy first time, like, on my own. And this is a boss later on in the game. And I wouldn't say I was particularly over leveled or anything like that. But yeah, to beat an end stage boss first time, normally when I play a FromSoft game that doesn't happen. It normally takes me a long time to learn their different attacks and how to deal with them. But this guy just jumps them up and down a lot, and as long as you roll at the right time and hit him with a couple of attacks, then yeah, I was thinking to myself, this is just the easy bit. There must be like a second stage to this fight. But no, that was it. It didn't happen. Now it does have the classic sort of Dark Souls shortcuts that you can open up, and the world is all interconnected, so it does feel like a real world you're exploring. The way it's all interconnected, and I think that's one of the strongest points of the game, is the actual game world itself. But as I said earlier, there are some serious problems with this game. Like trying to play together. If I was playing the game for any length of time and then my mate wanted to join me, I would have to restart the game. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to join me. It would just say session ended. You know, session has ended, and vice versa. He'd have to restart his game so I could join him. And if you played for any length of time, I think we've been playing for about an hour and a half here, bits of geometry would start, bits of geometry wouldn't load in, and even like collision geometry wouldn't load in. I think maybe they got a memory leak issue, so the longer you play the game, the less memory the system has to play with, and then it gets to a point where bits of geometry don't load in, and like here I've just literally fallen through the bottom of the map. So yeah, very disappointing. The game's been, multiple patches have come out for this game. So yeah, it's got some serious issues. Okay, but overall I did enjoy the game. And yeah, I would definitely encourage you to give it a go. I do think it is a decent game, and I did really enjoy it. Hopefully Hexworks will do something else and do something even better. But definitely, it's got some issues. Okay, so I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. And I hope to catch you in the next video. Goodbye for now.